So what we'll do next, and my name is Ilya Sotnikov, I'm Director of Product Management for Netwrix. So what we will do next is I will try to keep it really short. We'll go through a very brief product overview, how it works, what are the moving pieces there, how you deploy it, all that stuff. After that, we will have a few demos focused on just the core functionality, the Active Directory stuff. This is the core of our business. We will show some of the built-in reporting. We will show some of the interactive search. We will show a few use cases focused on the user data, focused on privileged accounts, that kind of stuff, so that we talk a little bit about how it is applicable in different scenarios. And then I want to show some of the newer stuff, so deployment on Amazon Web Services and some of the API use and some of the scripting there. So with that, I'll try to really jump quickly through the slides, but on a very, very high level, what we do is we collect, store, and present the data. And that data is about changes, states, and access to configurations, security settings, and content. So I'll give you a few examples here. Let's say configuration would be Active Directory structures, would be Active Directory schemas, domain controllers, roles, whatever, group policy objects and links, SQL settings, VMware configurations and settings, that kind of stuff. Security side, you can talk about everything from security permissions on a database, on a file, security group memberships, wherever they are, let's say in SQL, in Active Directory, in SharePoint, whatever. You can also talk about things that are specific to particular systems, like logins in SQL or specific accounts creation and deletion in other systems. And then when we talk about content, this can go down to file level in the file storage, in storage appliances, in SharePoint, or we can talk about access to user mailboxes, non-owner mailbox access, that kind of stuff. So we try to touch a little bit of all of that, and we'll try to show you how we actually apply that in different use cases. So this diagram is a little bit markety, but it actually helps to talk about this, collect, store, and present the data. So when we talk about collecting the data, there are a couple core principles for us in the architecture and the design. One thing that Arno actually mentioned already is we try to never use the intrusive technologies. So we understand that auditing is never the core business function. It's always a supporting function. So we want to stay outside of the process. We want to be out of the way so that we don't stand in between the user and the services, in between the user and the data. So whatever goes wrong, we don't interfere with the normal business processes. So we use only supported APIs. We try to collect as much data as we can using those non-intrusive technologies. So for that, we do, depending on the system, quite a lot of things. We can obviously rely on the native logs where those are available, and we try to collect as much information from there as we can. In addition to that, where there is lacking context information, we will try to do additional things. So we may do like snapshot comparison. So periodically take snapshots and just compare them so that we can fill in with more details. Depending on the system, we would also use things like replication API in Active Directory, DIRSync API, so that we don't miss the events. Whatever happens, if the domain controller is under stress, under constant load, events may not be written to the event log quickly enough, or they may actually be missing, things like that. But the replication API will tell us that, hey, this object actually changed. So even if we don't have all the details that we would feel from the events, like who made the change, we will at least know that, hey, this particular object was modified, so that you don't miss it. And then, in other systems like SharePoint, we would use other technologies like SharePoint event receivers and so on and so forth, depending on the system.
Is it a single agent that is used on all these different environments?
No, those are we don't necessarily need an agent on the box. So we try to allow to collect data remotely where possible. In some cases, it doesn't work well just because of the vendor's system limitation, like SharePoint. Server-side API provides way more functionality than the client-side, so that we have to put something on the box. But in other cases, we don't. We try to not make it mandatory. Although where it makes sense, we also provide this option to put something on the box, like a compression service, sort of, so that it collects the data locally, filters it out, so that we, have to create less traffic on the network. Okay. That kind of stuff. Then. Storage here in the middle is quite important for us. Every activity record that we find, whether it is a log on, a change, a read event, whatever it is, we write it to 2 different locations simultaneously. So one copy goes into a database, easy to retrieve, quick access online, reporting and interactive search works of that database, and then the other copy goes into a file-based compressed storage that is way cheaper than SQL drives. And then each of these has individual retention settings. So what we typically see is that customers or companies will keep the ongoing operational reporting data available for maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, depending on how much they need, and then everything else on the long term on the file-based archive will be stored for maybe 3 years, maybe 7 years, whatever their requirements are for compliance purposes, for security purposes, if they want to keep that information. And then if there is any sort of investigation or audit that requires you to pull up all the user account deletions from February 2014 or whenever that was, you can import the data from this long-term archive into the operational storage for investigation, and then do all the reporting, all the search against that.
Is that secondary storage worm? Is that read-only?
It's not read-only on the software side, but you can put it, if you want to, you can put it on a worm. To be honest, I haven't seen anyone who was enthusiastic enough to make that sort of setup because it's usually more costly, and they kind of tend to use just a normal NAS devices, and then with a backup going on for the offline. So it's theoretically possible, but I haven't seen implementations, to be honest. And then on the present side, it's fairly simple. We try to present the data in the way that is relevant to the particular company's processes and scenarios. So we can do regular generated reports, you can subscribe to them, you can publish them to a specific location, you can run ad hoc reports, you can get alerts if you need something that requires more immediate assistance or more immediate response. Let's say on domain controller demote, I want to know immediately that this happened, or domain admin's group membership changed, I want to know immediately. And also for sort of ad hoc, out of normal processes, questions or investigations, you have interactive search, and Jeff will show that. A little bit more detailed architecture. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time here, but basically the way you deploy it, there is the central Netwrix Auditor server that basically does all the heavy lifting, all the processing. The archive, the SQL server, and the file-based can both be remote, so you don't have to put everything on one box. And then to consume the data, to work with the search and reports, you have a client piece that can also be installed anywhere, so you can have it on your laptop or wherever. And you actually can delegate that sort of read access to someone who's not an administrator. So if you have, let's say, security manager or internal auditor, someone who needs that sort of data, but you don't necessarily want them to have ability to change the configuration of auditing, you can do that. You can just install them the client, give them permissions, they will use that.
So is that the only level of delineation of security is read-only and read-write? There's no RBAC in here?
So for right now, this is where we are. And like Arno said, we actually are moving into the size of the companies where this becomes a little bit of a limitation. So that's coming in one of the future versions. So probably because we are on record, I probably won't talk about timelines so that, I don't screw up. But we know this is important. We are working on this. And then on the integrations part on the right-hand side here, one thing that is important about the API that Arno was talking about is that it is working both ways. So we can consume the data. If you have SAP example, you want to have a single audit trail for all the systems that we support and something else, we can do that. And then we can also output the data. So if you want to leverage the Netwrix auditor data somewhere else, for your dashboards, for your other systems, we even had a customer who was doing a funny thing. They were putting together a Slack channel for all of the IT alerts in their environment. So they integrated all of the systems that could produce any sort of alerting, all the monitoring, all the operations systems, and they were sending the alerts into this Slack channel. So whatever.
That's ugly.
But very fashionable.
I didn't say this is beautiful.
It is very
possible.
hipster, but just what I need is a Slack channel scrolling by faster than I can block it.
Yeah,
It's like, this is what syslog is for.
But then you can use Slackbot to go and do corrective action.
Yeah, right. Like I said, this is what syslog is for.
I think the more common use case is actually a SIEM system like Splunk, or we have an ArcSight integration. So that was HP partners for.
Yeah.
And we will not replace the Splunk. It might be an idea if you use Splunk just for Windows auditing, but those systems are, let's say, far broader than we are. But you will later see how clear the information is we provide. So they use Splunk for forensics. They have to archive the log files, but to be, from an operational perspective, to have a clear information, to make a quick decision, the log files and the SIEM systems are not the right systems unless you basically program and add consulting work to make the logic within the SIEM system, which kind of we offer out of the box. Mm-hmm. So that's the natural integration.
Right. Yeah, there was a question.
Yeah. Do you have an audit capability, whether in-band or out-of-band, for your own system itself to see if it's doing anything?
Yes and no. One of the things that, again, Jeff will be showing is we have ability to record the video of all the administrator activity in addition to just the regular entries. And that is searchable as well. So in that way, we can also do that specific to an application. You can set up filters to only record the activity within this particular application so that you know when someone logs in to make any changes in this particular application. It's granular enough to do that. And then we are also adding more granular, just event-based sort of self-auditing in the future as well.
So is that something like an administrator goes in, turns off the auditing, does something that they shouldn't be doing and turns it on again? Is that the kind of thing? Because otherwise, you have an audited platform,
Right.
and someone can turn on and off the auditing to avoid being detected for making an AD change or something like that.
Right. So, well, obviously, when they make those AD changes, like I said, we make every possible effort to catch that, even if they clean up the event logs, even if they try to hide the traces.
But if they turn off the auditing in Netwrix,
So,
Actually picks up where it left off.
yeah, we'll
So-
pick it up later. So,
you can't fool Netwrix to.
you can fool it to a certain extent. So, if you clean up some of the traces, we'll probably miss some of the details. We won't show you like the exact time when it was changed or the actual account that was used to make that modification if you clean up the logs. But we will show you that, hey, during this time, there was a modification of your domain admins group. So, you might want to look a bit further into this.
Okay.
We do also report on the first, the fact that it was cleared. So if you go and say, hey, it looks like, someone was added to the domain admins group, and then, oh, by the way, these logs were cleared, so we couldn't tell it, but it was cleared by this guy.
So you can put two and two together.
A piece of that, so.
It's the who will watch the watchers problem.
Right.
With everyone who has full access, you have that question, and there's not really a solution.
I think you really need to limit access to the box itself too. I mean, if I can get hands-on to a box, there's really nothing you can do to prevent me from gaining access, right? I mean, it really doesn't. Eventually, I'm going to gain access to that box. So it's all about physical security, and it's about, I think, and this is something we see throughout the clients. Everybody's an enterprise admin. I've been places where 70% of the population are domain admins. Obviously, not best practice to say the least. I actually had an admin who I worked with many years ago, where if you got a call, if he couldn't figure it out in about 5 minutes, he made that person a domain admin, and then he moved on with his life. And yeah, that fixed most of those access problems. But again, so you see, some of the best practices coming back up, especially a lot of the compliance coming forward. But again, you always have to kind of revisit those.
I'm just thinking from an auditor's perspective, because no auditor will ever sit with an IT person and go, yeah, that's perfect. Their job is to find that little thing. And if they're going to come and say, great, you got all this Netwrix auditing, but can you prove to me that Netwrix was actually auditing while the main admins group has changed? Somebody couldn't turn off Netwrix.
So the interesting thing is when we talk to people and asking them, how do you guys use it? What is the biggest value that you get from this? More often than not, what we hear is that this helps them communicate with the auditors, with the security people, with management, with non-IT staff, like someone from HR doing investigation on a particular, user or employee who was behaving weirdly. So what they tell us is, hey, this helps us to save time when we get a question from them, right? So when the auditor comes in, they don't necessarily go into nitty-gritty details of how exactly you get that information, but the first question is, hey, give me the list of accounts that were deleted, or show me the access control changes on this particular box because this is something where your client data sits, or something like that. And being able to produce that sort of data quickly and in something that is readable, that goes a long way. And totally understand the other concern, but more often than not, this just helps with this very first question to be answered quickly instead of spending 4 days going through the logs on multiple
This
boxes.
is helping you find out where you may need to investigate further.
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing to add, we had a very interesting session recently with one of our newer large customers. And the session was to understand more what value they can basically get out of the tool. And funny enough, there were 3 PricewaterhouseCoopers external auditor people in that session. And the outcome was actually that it's good that they understand where also the limitation and the risks. They asked the same question: who audits
The auditor.
the auditor? Who audits the Netwrix auditor? But also understanding the limitations and how to address then those gaps was interesting for the PricewaterhouseCoopers people. It was a very interesting session, and the outcome was about an Excel with 200 points, where we added information and they added information, so they had basically a gap list and a prioritized list what they want to address. That was for us, it was interesting because usually we are not part of this kind of conversations, It's always around the corner. And in this session was really everyone was on the table, and that was very helpful.
Well, that would be brilliant if all auditors could agree on the information they needed to be audited.
It's not. It's
I spent
actually,
years at Deloitte. It'll never happen.
There were really,
We can talk about fairy tales later.
they were really,
By the hour, you're going to find more things that needed to be audited.
they were really critical. And I think the interesting part was actually also, usually the auditor finds something which it's obvious and they find it and then they're happy. In this case, I think the auditor had a deeper insight what actually is the data and what they're dealing with. But I think that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, if we all on the same page, like we are discussing here and we are all on the same level, we can talk.
Yeah, but
If
IT auditors are like the fire inspector. You always take the one fire extinguisher off the hook so he can find something wrong.
Yeah.
Because you don't want him to keep digging.
I did not want to exactly point that out in the position of the vendor, but actually it's like that.
And Julian, doesn't thinking like an auditor make you need a shower?
But it was also, I think, on your blog, Julian, when you mentioned that if you use auditing in the right way, it's a security tool.
Yeah.
And I usually, in the past, when I was, let's say, in another role, I try to make customers believe that. And in Europe, German people are really resistant to auditing and to security in general. And so if you just do your homework and not trust someone who gives you a box and says, hey, everything is good, life is good, but you don't have to do your work and be responsible. If you just do your homework, a lot of the breaches and a lot of, let's say, the dimensions of the breaches would be a lot less. You don't have to let's say, do a lot of crazy security stuff. Just do your homework.
Yeah.
And that's also what we just help with the homework.
Well, this is the problem. This is why security becomes so hard with auditing, because the auditors are trying to do a good job to protect the company, and they want to know who's got access to, the HR or the finance file share.
Oh.
I mean, actually getting that information is often right-click properties, security, looking at that, looking at the groups. You then land up writing a PowerShell script or something to enumerate those groups, which are then nested, and that's then got to go to a team to be audited, and someone's going to approve the people in the team, and it's a complete mess. And then the IT team lands up providing the auditors lever arch files full of printouts of groups and everything. It's insane. So, I mean, I work in an enterprise, and I can see this kind of tool is excellent just to be able to get information of who's in groups, who's accessing AD, who's got access to mailboxes, all that kind of thing, which helps with security.
So what we see is actually that sometimes the purchase is driven by purely compliance needs. The auditor told us we have to install something, so we are looking for something, right? There are those types of people, but happily not too often. And then there are people who are, just using that in the environments where they grew large enough to have, a lot of people who have admin or privileged access to the configurations, to the data, but they are not mature enough in terms of security, so they don't have proper processes in place. They haven't formalized it. They didn't have enough time to spend on that, so they just want to be aware of what's happening. If something changed, I want to make sure that that was following the process. They may have even a ticketing system and track changes there, but they have no way to say, all right, this particular thing doesn't seem right. Was it made through the process? Did it get all the approvals, or what happened here, right? So literally, I was talking to a customer who said, "Hey, I'm so happy. I was using your freeware tool for like 2 years, and now, luckily, we have our security folks driving. They need this report, so I could get budgeting for this tool." So that happens as well.
Okay, so you got multiples ways of entry into a company.
Right.
Either from the people who are a bit crazy in terms of access and they want to lock that down, and then also from an auditing perspective and from the security perspective.
Yeah, so both operations and security and auditing, obviously. All right, so we'll probably cut a bit of this and go into the demos. This is a slide on the API, but it basically shows just that we have the two-ways API in and out, so don't need to talk a little more about this. And then something that is also very new for us is we have been traditionally focusing on the data center Microsoft sort of environment. We are now starting to tap into the cloud world. We see demand there. We see customers going hybrid. We see our traditional data center customers saying, hey, we are now taking the mobile first, cloud first approach. How do you help us? And we are like, let's see what we can do. So we provide some of the pre-configured deployment modes in the infrastructure as a service sort of setup. So we are on the marketplaces for Azure and Amazon.
Let's take a picture.
Okay. And then we start tapping into auditing the cloud infrastructures as well. So we just taking the first baby steps there, added Exchange Online auditing with Office 365, and continuing to expand that in the future releases to Azure AD, SharePoint Online, and the rest of it. And also what I will show today is a little bit of API integration with the Amazon Web Services.